Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. Tonight's show is number 111. That's right, we've previously done 110 shows. I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. Thanks to you, the TNT Show and Indie Live are growing and delivering more exciting shows than ever before. You can watch us on the TNT Show, you can watch us on IndieLive.net, it's streamed out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, plus if you go to YouTube, you can see all the previous shows. And now you have a chance to support this vital channel. There's a crowdfunder running just now. Please donate as much as you can. And remember, this is one of your alternatives to BBC Scotland. What's not to like about that? It's been another great day for British democracy. I know I always say this when we're introducing the show, but I learned today that the putative PM, Liz Truss, claims she has no need of an ethics advisor because, quotes, she knows the difference between right and wrong, despite all appearances to the contrary. And then again, so did Attila the Hun. It didn't stop him from raping China and most of Europe. Besides, it's hard to know and to see and how it can be right to pour human waste onto and into the beaches and rivers in England, if you know the difference between right and wrong. Tonight, we are talking to a special guest. We'll be discussing the Scots language, books, journalism, culture, and much else besides with author Emma Grae. She is here for a full hour and taking your questions live. And there's still time to get your question considered. You'll find the details at Indie Live and on screen. Now, TNT, as you know, stands for The Nation Talks. So in many respects, this is your show. We're live and we're free. No license, no problem. Now, to our guest tonight, The Nation Talks to Emma Grae. Thanks so much for joining us, Emma. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And where are you joining us from tonight?
I'm joining you from not so sunny South London.
But I gather you've had some exceptionally good weather in London, isn't it?
Yeah, too good. This fan behind me has been a lifesaver.
Now, imagine we're speaking to an audience and they've only just heard your name and they don't really know what you've done. Give us a little bit of your background, please, Emma, and your most recent books.
Sure. So I'm a Scottish author and journalist. I've been writing in Scots now for near enough a decade, writing for even longer than that. Been working as a journalist in London for the past 5 years. The whole Scots language thing. My first book came out last year. So obviously writing books takes a very, very long time, least of all publishing them, and was very fortunate enough to get a chance to do it again this year. So I've got another book coming out in October called The Tongue She Speaks.
What's it called?
The Tongue She Speaks.
The Tongue She Speaks.
It's a reference to the Scots language itself, yeah.
Okay, what's it about? Just give us a quick taster.
Sure. So it's about a young girl who wants to write in Scots, but the whole world is just saying, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Nobody writes like that, apart from Burns, of course.
And how does she overcome this major challenge in her life?
Gumption, I think, but she does have a lot of challenges along the way, and I think the book is about finding the courage to sort of embrace your own voice and sort of go against the grain in that department, because I think it's particularly relevant, even more so when I started writing it. I started writing the book during lockdown, but the character herself I've been working on since 2016, so really before the big Scots language debate started. I would say the Scots language debate really started to kick off last year or in 2020 time. But the character has been around for a while. There's obviously a lot more to her than just the need to write Scots, but that's certainly the main arc of the book. And the line of it comes from a poem that my great-grandfather wrote in 1967 for the Herald about what Burns would find in Scotland in 67. He wrote it in pure Scots, and by sheer chance we somehow managed to still have a copy, and I kept it for a while, and that line just really stood out to me, so it's the title of my next book.
Excellent. Can you give us a verse or two from his poem?
Yeah, of course. Let me load it up. So this is in Old Scots. So obviously with the Scots language, there's different degrees, there's different ways of doing it. His Scots is very different from mine. But yeah, this is like a little, there's the start of it goes, here's Rhyme Rab. It's many a year since I cast eye on Scotland dear. Gye after I saw air, I came here to ken what's boss. Some feeling London rules a willy was. The lass I see is brallet Jean, but the limbs nae longer blush unseen. With dates and discs, it's ill to glean the tongue she speaks, and I see mither far fae lean, braid Scots and breeks.
Excellent.
Yeah. Very old Scots, yeah. Proper Billy Kay would approve. I'm sure he does approve. I'm sure he's
God bless Billy Kay.
Yeah.
If people wanted to read the whole poem, do you have it on your website? Is it available?
I do, yeah. It's currently on my Twitter, the original version of it, but it's going to be republished as part of my second book.
Excellent, excellent. Now, what sort of challenges? You've spoken about the challenges that your heroine faced. What about you? What challenges have you faced?
I think myself has been my biggest challenge. I think when it comes to writing, I think it's very hard to find the motivation and find the time to do it when you're working full time. It takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of self-confidence as well, which has been really hard for me. Like I spent so long trying to publish one book. I never thought I would get to do two. That was least of all potentially get to do even more than two. That would be great. I've got a lot more in the pipeline if I get the chance to do it, which hopefully I will. But yeah, I spent so long on Be Good to Your Mammy and just focused on it entirely for it took me, well, it was 5 years from start to finish, 5-6 years. And then when it was done, it was this time last year, it was finished and I felt so bereft, like, because I was just so attached to it. I was like, oh, it's gone. Like, it's much longer than a pregnancy. This is like a 6-year thing. And then you get a wee book at the end of it and you're like, wow, that was it, was it? So yeah, that was actually really hard on me. And then I was really fortunate that I just sort of threw myself into the next book with no guarantee of publication. I actually got my great grandpa's poem tattooed on my arm as well in a moment of madness where I thought, I'm going to get it. It's going to happen. So I'm just going to do this. And then, yeah, and then through sheer fortune, I managed to get it published in April and sent it off to get typeset last night. But again, it does definitely take a lot of willpower and pushing through, being tired and stuff like that. I was up till 1 o'clock last night just doing line edits, just checking it. And then, you're putting in I work 8.5 hour days. So I'm doing that during the day as a journalist and then still finding the time at night to get these novels done. So yeah, it's a lot of work. And I love getting the comments from the, I don't know what to call them, but we sort of call them Scots language deniers. But yeah, they sort of say like, you're doing this because you're making a fortune from it. And I'm like, no. No, like, I mean, if you saw what I've made, you would not be doing what I'm doing. This is not, if I wanted to make money, I would be doing something else.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone really understands how challenging an author's life is. I mean, you've talked about some of the emotional, perhaps psychological effect of having this very long pregnancy, and all of a sudden, there is your creation.
Yeah.
You're launching it into the world, but you don't know what the world's reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you love it, but is the world going to love it? And there's that. I mean, it's all the books I've written have been technical, and you get approached by in my case, approached by a publisher. We want to do this. We're going to put in all this effort to marketing it and all the rest of it, which turned out to be about 4 days, I think.
Yeah,
but then
really.
I spoke to people who were successful, and they put their books in the back of a car and just take them around the country. And browbeat publishers and browbeat stationers and use it and booksellers and say you've got to do this. You've got to put it up front somewhere.
Yeah.
You ever thought of that sort of? I mean, how successful have the books been? Because if they're successful, you don't have to do any of this stuff.
The first one did well. It did a lot better than I thought it would do. It sold out quite quickly. We got to do like a second edition, which is still selling. Excellent. I think the second one could potentially do better. I think that the first one was quite a complicated structure. Like, I was insistent that I was going to do a family drama, and I was going to do it from the point of view of 3 generations, which was a lot for a first book. Like, I started writing it when I was 21 going on 22, and the woman who was sort of helping me, I did it as part of my master's degree, started writing it there, and she was like, you should not do this. This is a bad idea. This is too complicated. And then I did it, and it was the only one that got published from that cohort. So clearly it was worth it. But it was well, at least so far. I mean, I'm sure the others will get their book published in time. But yeah, it was absolute madness to at least attempt to write in 4 voices. And what I did was I varied each character's use of Scots depending on their age and their socioeconomic background. And that's something that you do see a little bit in my second book, but I'm definitely, you can see a confidence shift from the first one to the second, I think, anyway, in terms of like my willingness to use Scots and my spellings and stuff like that. I feel like with Scots, you know, there was a story that I wrote that got published. I believe it was during lockdown, or it was just towards, it was like early 2021. And the publisher, no fault to the publisher, because it was in a book full of English stories, was like, can we tone this down slightly because people should be able to read it? Can we use like a bit less and stuff? Whereas with this book, I feel like it's been pretty unapologetic about the use of the Scots language. It's just sort of gone for it, really.
Well, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people, despite all the pressures and all the challenges that authors experience, and you've mentioned just a few tonight. I'm sure if we had time, you could tell us many, many more. So many people would love to write, but they don't even know where to start. I mean, how do you find a publisher? How do you convince somebody that writing in Scots is a good idea, for example?
I don't think you should write with the view that it's going to get published, because I think you're kind of setting yourself up for problems there, because I've seen people in the past try and write stuff that they think is going to be popular. And I know I'm talking from a point of view of absolute privilege. I'm aware of this, that people look at me and be like, it's easy for you to say you've done it. And I'm like, I'm aware of that. But I think that if you love the story you're writing and you believe in that story, you're going to want to write it anyway and enjoy writing it anyway. When I started writing Be Good to Your Mammy, it was almost like a therapeutic exercise. It was almost like, can I do this? Can I create something this big and let it go? And I still find it weird that it's there. And I think about that book more than the one that's just about to come out in October. But yeah, the Scots language thing was a happy accident. My book unintentionally came out at the same, I believe Shuggy Bean was the year before, but it came out at a time when people were talking a lot more about Scots language. And again, no one could have really foreseen Len Penny's Scots Word of the Day really taking off. So I had unintentionally timed it really well, which was a complete accident. But I mentioned at the start of my book, I credit my old pal Lorna from uni. Scots for me started, we were in Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow drunk. We were both drunk on White Russians in a student bar and thought, this is a fantastic idea. And she said, I'm going to rewrite Tia Mouse as Tia Selfie. And she wrote it in 2014 and it was a huge success. But at that point in time, younger people writing Scots was still not really done. And then she wrote another one about Donald Trump ripping the mick out of him. Like, I think it was when he got in 2016. Again, it won some like poetry competition in Australia or something like that. And that put the idea of writing Scots in my head, although I had done it in 2011, but it was kind of subconscious. But because of Lorna, I sort of thought, oh, I can write like that as well. And then when I was writing, I used to work in a care home, so I was writing from the point of view of the old people. And obviously the older generation is, again, more unapologetic in their use of Scots. So when I was writing from their point of view, it came out a lot more. And I remember we sort of, when I initially started, everyone was like, oh, it's the vernacular. And it's like, oh, you write in slang, don't you? And it wasn't until I'd really been doing it for, I'd basically written a book in Scots before I realized that I'd written a book in a different language, which is bananas when you think about it. But yeah, that was what happened.
It's so often the case, though, if you have courage in your convictions, that you carry the day, you know. But I was just wondering,
years.
You had the courage of your convictions. You faced down your challenges. But how did you manage to find a publisher who felt the same way or sort of the same way?
That was hard. So basically, the first book was with a place called Unbound, which they've taken chances on books that they think are well written, but don't necessarily have commercial appeal. And the idea is that you can get enough pre-orders to justify the existence of the book. So I was feeling really, really rubbish in 2018. Actually, it was late 2018. Sent the book to them, and I thought, this is probably never going to happen for me. This is just a pipe dream and it's not going to happen. And because I realized that what I was doing was quite niche anyway. And then in January 2019 they said, yes, we'll publish it, which was amazing. And I decided by hook or by crook I was going to get enough pre-orders that Mammy was going to happen. And I managed to do it within 10 months. So we crowdfunded it. I wouldn't do it again. And I was really, really lucky that I didn't have to do it again. And I'm grateful to Unbound for the opportunity to get to do it, because it meant that they're like a completely traditional publisher. So the production value of the book was really good. Like I had a full editor. The editor I had was brilliant. Her name was Sam Boyce. And she was Scottish herself. Or I think she was Scottish, or at least she was very, very good with Scots. She really knew what she was doing, and she helped me really get that book to where it needed to be. And yeah, they were very patient with me, because I was an absolute nightmare with that book. I'm not going to lie. My second publisher got it easy. I feel bad for John Mitchinson if he ever sees anything. I will say thank you forever, but yeah, I was a nightmare, because I was like, we need to get this right. And it meant like changing like 800 words and like adding on like production costs and stuff. And I think they were just like, do we really have to do this? So I think they're quite glad that like they're not having to do it with the second one. But the second one was easier, because I knew what I was doing this time.
Yeah, and also, was it the same publisher, or did you change?
So I went with a Scottish publisher this time. So again, I have loads of people to be grateful for, because the odds of you just submitting a book and getting it taken these days are really, really slim. So Unbound knew that I knew social media, and they knew I could promote and market myself quite well. So I think that was one of the reasons that they picked my book. And then I was able to do that. That was something that they were right about. And then with the second one, I'd finished it at Christmas time and was like, how am I going to do this again? Because I did not want to do Unbound again, because I just knew that it was something that people looked down on. And I knew that I had to get a traditional publishing deal. And then I tweeted saying, got a book in Scots, but like, you know, can someone just get me a publisher? Can someone just help? And then Jane Godley, of all people, tagged her publisher in it, and then they emailed me a week later, and they were in fact, it was like the same day or something, they emailed me and said, can we see your book? And I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, this is actually happening. I actually considered it was going to happen this fast. So I sent them 10,000 words, and they really liked it. And then I sent them the whole book, and then I met them in London, and then they took it, which was surreal that I'd managed to have like a 4-month turnaround on between finishing the book and it coming out. But it was actually like the best thing that could have happened, because it was really what I needed. I needed to know that I could do it again, and that it wasn't just a one-off fluke.
Good. And if people want to get a copy of the book you've just finished, where do they go? Who's your publisher this time?
So Luaf Press is my publisher,
Luaf,
and
okay.
Luaf, yep, in Edinburgh, and you can get it all. You can pre-order on Waterstones. I'm not entirely sure of their website, but I believe it's available for pre-order everywhere else now, or you can sign up on Luaf Press's website to see when it's available. But as far as I'm aware, it's available everywhere right now, because it's going to be out in 7 weeks.
Good, and we've got it on screen. Waterstones.com/author/Emma-Grae 491-2889. So
yeah, the two of them are there.
So that's terrific. Well, every success with that. I hope it goes exceptionally well. We've had a technical question. The question is, does Emma have a difficulty with autocorrect spell check when typing in Scots?
Yes, it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle between me and spell check, and it's I think you have to, as a Scots author, accept that you're kind of battling against a system that was made for English, and that it wasn't made for you to be writing in this language. And I've had to sort of let go of perfection when it comes to Scots, and sort of accept that I'm going to do the best possible job I can to spell check it myself and proofread it myself. I'm not going to get it 100%, and I will drive myself bananas if I try and get it 100%. But yeah, it's really difficult. Like I usually sort of make a list of Scots words, and then I'll search them to see if they're all spelt correctly, and sort of take it from there. It was easier. The more you do it, the easier it gets, but it is difficult because, you know, I'm quite bad for missing out words because I type so fast, and then I don't see them because in my head, my brain just fills in the blank, and then a normal spell check would pick that up. But obviously I don't have that advantage. So it was really annoying. Like, so with my second book, my first book, there was typos like that. There weren't a huge amount. Like, I don't think it was ever a problem for anybody, but when I got it, I saw them and I was like, oh. But it's fine. Like, I mean, it doesn't detract from the book, and I don't think there's no such thing as a typo-free book. And the first Harry Potter had a typo on the cover. Luckily, that never happened to me. So at least it wasn't on the
cover. Why do you think there's been antipathy to not just to you, but people generally writing in Scots?
I think it's classism. I think at its heart, it's classism, and it's this sense of you know, it's a working, and it is like people who do speak Scots, like and at least grow up with it being like their mother tongue and who are allowed to freely speak it tend to be working class, in my experience. And I know that that may not be everyone's experience, especially like the further up north you get, you've got these small communities where Scots really does thrive. But where I was from, it was definitely the way I spoke, because I did not grow up in a rich place, and it was very much, I was told to stop speaking like that because I was going to have problems down the line if I didn't change how I spoke. And I remember I didn't even realize how strong my Scots was until I think I was maybe like 20, and my mum played back a video of me in Disneyland of all places, and I just sounded like a foreign child. It was crazy. And the reason my voice is like the way it is now is obviously like I live in England. People have to be able to understand me, and people, and even before I got here, I knew that I had to speak properly, quote unquote. But I can still write Scots and I can still speak Scots as well as anybody else. But I found that the class thing's sort of been turned on me a little bit now, where people seem to have made this false assumption that I loaded and that this is like a fun pastime because I have so much money that I have nothing better to do than promote a dead language. And it's like, you do realize I've literally been out of pocket for doing this. Like I spent a lot of money promoting my first book that was my money, and it was worth it. I saw it as an investment and I saw it as for like the greater good, but like it was not something that's ever really made me much money. And that's not why I do it at all. So if you're wanting to publish a book and make money, just forget it. It happens to some people, but even if you publish a book that does reasonably well, like mine, the financial returns are basically non-existent. So yeah. But yeah, the class thing as well. But I also think that an issue that I've faced, and definitely some Scots creators, is they do seem to go for the women much harder than they do the men in terms of criticizing them online. They are a lot nastier, and they give you comments that I've not seen them give men who create in Scots the same level of abuse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that women are exposed to some exceptionally vile, I mean, you know, social media can be pretty rabid sometimes, but it always seems to me that women get a much worse experience perhaps than the men do. But then again, it is what it is. It's just a great big collection of individuals who hide behind whatever the hell they hide behind. You know, I mean, I don't. It's what was it about your background? I mean, we don't have to go into any great detail, but you spoke there about growing up. Where did you grow up?
I grew up just outside Glasgow in Clydebank.
In Clydebank, okay.
Yeah.
So I think, isn't Gerard Butler from Clydebank? Am I mistaken?
I'm not sure.
I'm just trying to remember all the famous people from Clydebank.
Me, so yeah, there is that. I mean, I think Billy Connolly, did he not live in the area? He had a really famous joke about the bus station in Clydebank, which everyone who was there knew exactly what he was talking about. But yeah, Clydebank's not a particularly, like, I mean, I've not lived there in a while, but like, at least my experience of it was like, it was not the richest place in the world. And I went back there. At one point I was teaching in one of the schools in Clydebank, and it was a shame because like some of the kids didn't have access to internet and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of wealthy people in Clydebank for sure. Like anywhere in Scotland, things are getting more and more expensive, and the poverty divide is getting bigger and bigger. But I think as a general thing, Glasgow does have quite a big rich and poor divide. The poor are very, very poor. I'm not saying I was one of them, but I was definitely never someone who was born with a silver spoon in my mouth or anything like that. So the sort of stuff that was sort of being like leveled at me now is like uncomfortable, to say the least, when they're sort of like, you're doing this as a hobby, because it's like I have to work very, very hard to stay afloat. Nobody's supporting me financially apart from myself. This is, and anything that I do with Scots is, you know, I'm doing it out of my free time, out of my free choice, because I want to do this. And then they all assume that I'm like politically motivated. And again, it's like, I live in London. Like why would I be that politically motivated? Like, I've never been a political person. Like, if I wanted to go into politics, I probably would have done that. Maybe I would probably even be a political journalist. I'm not even a political journalist. Like, it's bananas.
I think there's a bit of projection goes on with some people on social media. I mean, they project onto their victim in inverted commas, the very characteristics that they deplore in themselves sometimes. You become a sort of metaphor for this inner conflict that's going on, which they can't deal with. But by externalizing it, somehow that gives them a bit of, I don't know, relief of some kind. I don't know.
I think any type of bullying or any type of resentment comes from, at least in my experience, is it something that you see within yourself that you're going to attack somebody else for maybe being unashamed of or unapologetic about, or that you're ashamed of it, so they should be too. Like I've seen it.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. Maybe there's a book there, Emma.
Like it's I'm trying not to engage with it because I know that it's like you're fighting a futile battle, but at the same time, I mean, some of it is like comical, the stuff that they say, like especially with me, like there was one guy, he was like, I posted like a picture of myself with shortbread because I got called a white supremacist for writing in Scots, that was a new one. I'm not gonna lie, that was on Saturday. And then I posted a picture of shortbread and said, well, if Scots is racist, I guess this shortbread is. And then he was like, oh, you've got no teeth. And I'm like, no, I definitely got teeth. Like, what? And then another guy was like, you need braces. And I'm like, yeah, do you want to crowdfund for braces? Because that's cool. Like, I'm totally okay with that. It's going to cost about $6,000. So if you guys want to personally finance it so that you can insult something else, that is totally fine with me. Like, it's really bad. Like, I was literally like, maybe I should like give them my PayPal. I mean, I'm not going to do that, but like, I have like been like really, really close to doing it where I'm just like, for crying out loud. Like, I mean, I'm not the main target. Like, I do think Iona Fife has been getting it really, really in the neck recently in a way that I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And the dragging up of historic tweets that she, like, from 2011. Now, I'm a good bit older than Iona. I think Iona was about 13 at the time. And previously said that, like, some of them were posted by her classmates, like, grabbing her phone and being silly. And, like, it's also, like, excuse me, I was extremely problematic as a teenager myself, and I'm the first one to admit it. Like, I did some stuff that I'm not proud of as a child. Why are you holding a grown adult to those standards and trying to shame her for it? Like, it doesn't make sense, but it does make you a bit paranoid that people are looking for stuff like that to smear you, and then they're literally deliberately taking the dates off it as well. And then they started this whole thing recently where she talked about, I don't know if you know of Agent P, this woman, I think her name's Pauline, who's got this Twitter account who it's like, I don't know who Pauline is because everyone was saying Iona Fife is or defamed Pauline, but I'm like, Pauline's a picture of a man taking his hat off. How can you defame someone who goes by the name Agent P, who clearly wants their identity to be hidden anyway? Like, it makes no sense. And then I was like, you can't defame someone that's anonymous. And then they said that Agent P, or like, I think Iona was talking generally about death threats, which she's completely right about, because the guy who called me a white nationalist, basically people had found his previous tweets, which were the worst ones I'd ever seen, where he just said anyone that supports the indie movement should get sent to certain things to do with Second World War, which is basically implying death. It's like you're promoting genocide. And what's really annoyed me about that is I reported him to the Labour Party and I've heard nothing back. It's just gone completely unchecked.
Yeah.
And he said it again today.
Oh, you may well. I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for any response.
No.
Yeah, and that you mentioned Iona. As I said offline, if Iona would like to come on the show, she'd be more than welcome, and we can talk about some of this stuff. But I'd like to talk a wee bit about some of the questions that have come in. Jay is asking, Emma, instead of saying I am, do you personally tend to say or
The first one. The first one for sure.
Yeah. Did you, by the way, did you find it quite difficult to change when you moved to London? Did you find that strain, or did it come to you fairly straightforwardly?
What do you mean?
Like changing your accent, changing your delivery? Because
I think I've intentionally done it. Like, I think I just sort of like was aware that some people might not understand. Like, even just like the odd Scots word that I will use makes no sense to people. They're like, what? Sorry, what does that mean? They don't understand. But the interesting thing about being a Scots author in London is that I have never had an English person slag off what I do or say anything negative about it. They're just curious because it's something different. They've never said, I've never had any disparaging remarks about it. The people that have given me abuse have all been Scottish, without exception, which is interesting, I think, because
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, it's a well-known trait, really. I mean, it's a characteristic that's fairly common. In fact, it's not just. I mean, it's across the world. Wherever you get uh, people who want to change things, want to honour their background, there's always somebody around. It's never the people that are not acquainted with it. As you say, I have the same experience when I moved to London. People were curious about some of the words I used. Not so much that they were difficult, I just used them in a different context. You know, I mean, for example, I would say to somebody, "Where do you stay?" And they would say, "Do you mean where do I live?" Because in Scots, stay and live are synonymous, but they're not necessarily the way Londoners often see the two words. But these are so it's fairly. Another question is, what topics did Emma cover for Cosmopolitan and LADbible?
So I've covered generic news. I've done the news. Like I was working for it was a British-based place, but we covered American stuff all the time, which was really interesting. So I basically did the whole of the Trump run largely from like early 2016 onwards. And yeah, that was interesting. Covered the rise and fall of Trump. I've done a lot of stuff on sex and relationships, and that would be for Cosmopolitan and stuff like that. And that's sort of similar. What I'm doing at LADbible right now is I'm working for their women's interest page, but I'm also gonna, when needed, I'll write for their main page and cover really what's happening. But I'm doing like original pieces as well. Obviously, Scots language isn't like relevant to these because these are like very large publications that try and appeal to as many people as possible, but it's good because it gives me the chance to talk to other people. It also gives me a chance to have an identity that's not the author, which I find quite helpful, especially now that this is obviously it's going well, which is great, but sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. So it's nice that I'm kind of operating under two different names. So I use my birth surname as a journalist, and Grae's not actually my name. But it's kind of good to have the two separate. So I can just like, if I'm having a bad day or if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by everything, I can just be like, oh, I'm just a journalist. Let's just pretend the book is this. It's also weird because like I find it kind of awkward telling people that don't necessarily know me that I write books and then having to explain the whole Scots language thing. Because I mean, to be fair, when they find out, they think it's hilarious. Like I've got a few friends who are so invested in the drama who know nothing about the Scots language. They just think it's ridiculous and just so unbelievable that they just sort of follow along. And I'm like, yeah, it is entertaining as much as it's terrible at times. It can be quite entertaining, just how bizarre it gets at times.
But maybe there's a read across, or maybe you've already done this, you know, why men in particular should be so incensed by what you do. I mean, maybe there's a piece there. I mean, because there's clearly a problem some people have. I mean,
there was one woman who was really, really nasty. I'm not good. Like she was a standout character. That there was one woman who last year tweeted Strathclyde Police about me, which was interesting. So, in fact, it wasn't Strathclyde Police. Was it Strathclyde Police or was it Police Scotland? I know it changed the jurisdiction. Everyone pointed out that it changed a while ago. But wherever the police is in Scotland, she tweeted me about them and said that I defamed her after she felt the need to call. Because basically, I tweeted saying, I'd said something like, if you're a Tory, this book's probably not for you, or if you're like a TERF, like, because again, it's not, it's very lefty, and I know that. It's not political at all, but like my second book, for example, has a transgender coming out story as part of it. The main character isn't, but she's got a friend who is, because that's my experience. I'm not trans, but like someone else is, and I think that's important to sort of give some representation to in literature. And yeah, she's basically the week that I'd tweeted that was the week that the Conservative, I think it was David Ames, was murdered, which was obviously absolutely terrible. But she managed to twist what I said to say that I condoned murder. And I was like, are you off your absolute rocker? And then out who she was, and I did work out who she was because I'm a journalist. Of course I worked out. Like, she tried so hard to keep, she was an estate agent, and I know she was an estate agent because she had a story in the Daily Record about how people were stealing the signs, like a rival property company in Glasgow. I was like, do you seriously think I'm not going to work out who you are? If anyone's going to work out who you are, it's me. And I worked out who she was. I think her name was Sandra. I'm pretty sure it was Sandra, but she just had this random picture of herself pouting on Twitter, and I was like, But the problem was I really upset her because I reverse searched her images to try to work out who she was, because I knew I would work it out eventually. And then the first person that came up is a well-known Scottish porn star called Lana Wolf. And to be fair, they looked quite similar. And I was like, surely not Lana Wolf. And she had quite a big following. So I thought, is Lana Wolf secretly like, because she seemed like quite a good humored girl, because she's quite big on TikTok. And I was like, and then this woman was like, you've just defamed me by calling me a porn star. And I'm like, it's kind of a compliment though. She's a pretty girl. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be that offended, to be honest. I was just trying to get to the bottom of your identity, considering you were quite happy to tweet my publisher and Waterstones to say don't stock her book because she condoned the murder of a conservative politician. The fact that her book has nothing to do with politics. Madness.
Just madness. Talking about TikTok, by the way, Davlin90 says, look, I need to go now. I've enjoyed your story, Emma. Keep up the promotion of the Scots language. There you are. You've got a fan on TikTok. Well, that's a good reminder to everyone that the show is going out on TikTok. By the way, we often get banned on TikTok.
Really?
Yeah. People. I'm not quite sure how it works, because at my age, some of these things pass me by. But apparently, people can protest, and TikTok will take some action, which apparently Kevin will tell you more about it after the show. But I'm not sure if that's a badge of honor or a badge of shame that we get banned by TikTok. It seems to me that most of what we do is pretty innocuous, but then again, I suppose being innocuous is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, I've had some crackers of comments. Like I tweeted about Ian Smart, and this guy was like, "Well, you probably are a racist then," and I'm like, you can't just call people these things without evidence, especially when the guy calling me like has actual racist tweets to his name that he's not prepared to acknowledge. Like, and he said to me, I'll apologize to you if you can confirm you're not a nationalist. And I was like, this is kind of besides the point. You called me a white nationalist, then in another tweet said all nationalists are racist. So you've called me a racist within the space of an hour without actually knowing my stance on anything, just because I write books in Scots and promote the Scots language. It's very frustrating. I think, like, because I've not really said anything today, because it was kind of getting quite heated at the weekend, and I saw some of the stuff that's been said about Iona today, and it's basically all men, to be fair. Like, I know there's some women that get involved, but it is largely men, and the sexist drivel that they spout, and they think that they're gonna bother us. They're not. Like, it's entertaining at worst, really, and a bit annoying. But it's not something that's going to hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, well, it's all this projection again, and I mean, you have to feel a wee bit sorry for people who do that. Kevin, by the way, is reminding me we're still streaming to TikTok as we speak, which is great. And by the way, we run polls during every show asking people what they think of that and the next thing, and we have a fairly eclectic audience, which is great. It's right across the board, which is marvelous, because I hate the whole idea of preaching to the choir. It almost seems to me a bit pointless, but I can see it has some value in some places, but most of the time I like to talk to people who disagree or have something specific to talk about, like talking about Scots language, which I strongly feel ought to be supported rather than sort of criticised. Now, we talked about journalism. I mean, that's also a challenging profession. I mean, I do a column in the Sunday National. I wouldn't necessarily call it high literature by any means, but nonetheless, it's an attempt to deal with topical issues every fortnight. But it strikes me this is a particularly difficult time to be a journalist. I mean, do you feel that?
I think it depends. Like, I think I've been quite lucky with the way with like the avenues that I've gone down, that I've been able to, but I've definitely found it's a tricky industry, because it's very much like the people who are at the top have been at the top for a long time, and it can be difficult to sort of progress in it. I think for me, it's nice that I have this Scots language thing going on that I'm not entirely like that isn't all there is to me. I think if I was trying to progress as a journalist and stuff, I think I would find it's extremely competitive, especially when it comes to like, so I have like a day job where I like, you know, get like a set salary and a set amount of articles to write, yada yada yada, but I do write freelance pieces which are usually like original commissions, and the competition there is intense, and it's great when you get them because it's good money and stuff, but it's difficult and it's draining to like come up with the ideas. And yeah, it's good when it's good, but it's I don't know. I'm glad it's not all there is to me, because I just don't see, like I was working in production for a little bit until May there. I was working in producing like old TV reports, and I don't think that TV was for me. Like I really would rather just sort of not be that in that particular world. Like I think it's these big producers and big companies, like I just don't know. I just don't know, to be honest. Like it's a hard one because there's so many people that want to get into journalism and stuff, and it's such a closed off. Like when you're not at the top, like I don't really think that there's a huge amount you can do, to be honest. Like you can write the odd opinion piece, you can do this, that, and the other, but you're not the one in charge. Like I think they're the ones that have all the power. I know it's been very, very vague, but like I prefer the type of news that I've been doing the longest, which is social editorial, because when I do write originals, I can do quite worthwhile stuff with that. But I've been lucky that I've never worked for any place with like a strong political agenda. So I've never really found myself in hot water as a journalist. In fact, the most controversial stuff I've done has been with the National.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure everyone understands the power relationship between the editor and the journalist. I think they have perhaps the feeling that journalists just go off and write whatever they like.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether the editor thinks it's good or not, they will run it. The reality, of course, as you know, and as we all know, is something very different.
Yeah.
I mean, editors set the agenda.
Yeah, like I said, I've been lucky that I've never worked for anywhere that's had like a hard political line, because it's London, so it tends to be more everything sort of thing. But like the stuff that has been more political, like the first article that I wrote for the National, they put me on the front page, which I wasn't expecting, and I got like a text message, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun day on Twitter. And it definitely was. Like there were a few very, very upset people on the other side of the independence debate that were not happy with what I said. They were like, I've never been given the front page of any newspaper. Who does she think she is? And I'm like, to start with, I didn't ask to be on the front page. I asked if I could write about it. They said yes. I'm not the one that decides what goes on the front page. That's up to the editor, not me personally.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm not sure a lot of people understand. You know, I see people getting upset about journalists and saying this journalist does this and journalist does that, and they seem to overlook the fact that, you know, it's the editor who determines the line. It's the editor who determines what gets written and how it gets written. Yeah. And the journalist can't meet those requirements, then the journalist is history. It's as simple as that. If you want to pay your mortgage, you write what the editor wants.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Or you just like find a publication that's like lefty and like not gonna do that to you. Like I've seen like I think it was it the Scottish Express or something like that. That was they wrote an article about Iona, and it was disgraceful, quite frankly. Like the language, like I said, I've never worked for a particularly political place, so I've been really lucky in that sense. But I don't know, Scotland does seem like a different world when it comes to journalism that I have only vaguely been involved in with as a freelancer, but never actually involved in. But it does seem a lot more hardline political. This is the side that this newspaper's on, and we're gonna get them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I don't blame individual journalists. I think the editors, though, have a case to answer, but they, in turn, of course, will defend themselves quite rightly, in my view, by pointing to the owners and saying, "Oh, I write what the owners want." You know, I just don't dream it up on the spot and send these cub reporters out to extract whatever vile material they can get and stick it in the paper. I mean, the line is determined by the people who own the property, whatever the property is, whether it be. I mean, for example, if you take the the Express. The Express comes from the same stable as the Mirror and the Daily Record, and yet writes completely the opposite material. That's because the owners have figured out there's an audience, that there's a market there, and you can sell ads, and you can so if people don't like it, maybe what they want to do is stop buying stuff in the ads or stuff. I don't know. But that's the reality for publications worldwide. You need to be able to generate an income, whatever the publication is. It's not as easy as people think. So you have all these talents at your disposal. You write books. You're a journalist. Oh, by the way, how much in a typical day? How much time do you have to spend on journalism? Because you said you fitted the books into the evenings and weekends and stuff. Is that because your whole day is occupied with writing as a journalist?
Yeah. I mean, it's good in the sense that it means that I'm very much I feel like I'm quite on it in terms of my ability, technically quite on it in terms of stuff. And I'm quite good at writing fast and large amounts because that's what I have to do. So it's good in that sense. But yeah, it is tricky. It is, if you want to write books, you can find the time to do it. Like, for example, so my book's just gone, so I'll probably take a break for like a week or two, just get fresh eyes. And then once I've got a printed copy, I'll have a look at it again and just do another quick line edit and make sure everything looks good. I've made some notes to myself and some stuff that I want to just check. But yeah, I think on the weekends I probably spend like 5 or 6 hours writing fiction, and then during the week like an hour, anything from like an hour to like 4 hours, maybe more. It just depends. Like last night was a few hours. It just depends, really. I think you can find the time if you want to find the time. And like I said, so a typical novel, though the first book I did ended up at 84,000. The second one's slightly shorter, but it is aimed at a younger audience, and it's 72. And but that was written, 72,000 was written over the course of like a year and a bit. About a year and a half, I think. So maybe that would be like averaging like 1,000 a week. But obviously, I finished it long before then. So yeah, that kind of puts it into context, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we've had another question about. I wish I hadn't raised it now. Jay is asking, is the Scotland editor James Cook responsible for Glenn Campbell's conduct? Well, the short answer is yes, of course he is. If you're the editor, you're responsible. You tell the journalists what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. The other question being asked is, Emma, your thoughts on the BBC asking Diana Gabaldon, not quite sure about the spelling there, not to say anything inflammatory when she was talking in a 2014 interview about Outlander. I don't know if you saw the clip. Did you see the clip?
No, sorry.
Sorry. You know that she writes the Outlander books. I think she's.
Yeah, and I know I've never seen Outlander, but I've been told it's quite like a stereotypical view of Scotland that gives you like I've never seen it. I've just seen sort of some of the criticism of it. I've never watched it personally.
Well, I think she can correct me. She can come on the show and correct me. But I think Diana lives in New Mexico or the Southwest somewhere in the States,
okay.
and writes with that sort of perspective. And of course, it's marketable. It's highly marketable. You've only got to look at the the amount of shows that they've run. You can't do that if the stuff isn't popular. It just doesn't. If it doesn't sell, you can't get series after series after series. But she was, when in 2014 she was asked, I gather, not to say anything inflammatory. I think the way she coped with it was she was asked by the reporter, do you have anything to say about this business about Scotland and independence? She says, no, not really. So I'm an American. All I can tell you is that we had a bit of trouble with England not leaving when we wanted them to leave. I'm paraphrasing her now. I hope she'll forgive me. But roughly innocuous again.
I remember 2014 really, really well as well, because I was just about to graduate uni at the time, first time graduating uni. So I was 20 going on 21 when the independence referendum happened. it was a weird time because Glasgow had the Commonwealth Games, so a lot of people were really geared up in favour of Scotland. Like I think when we had the vote, like I thought we would get it and we didn't. I was kind of thinking that it was going to happen and it never. But again, I didn't think Brexit would happen and it did. And I wasn't really sure Trump was going to get in and he did.
I mean, I'm fascinated. We don't have a lot of time left, at 10 minutes, but I'm fascinated by the work you did on Trump, because you did it from this side of the Atlantic, looking at and that's actually, to me, that's absolutely fascinating. Having lived for a time in the States, in the Midwest, in a state, Minnesota, that was left, it struck me as very odd. There's a bunch of things I found odd. Once I was having my hair cut, and the guy said to me, "You have a funny accent. Where are you from?" And I said, "Scotland." He says, "Scotland, Scotland. Is that near Sweden?" And I said, "Yeah, sort of." He said, "Yeah, they got socialism there, don't they?" But it was like a bad word. It was like S-H-I-T. They got. I said, "Yeah, I guess they do." He said, "Geez, oh." And then he told me this story. Kid you not? Absolutely true. He said, "I'm still paying off my father's medical expenses. I have a second mortgage and I have 3 jobs. This is one of them, cutting hair, because my father had a recurring condition and the bills were so enormous that the only way I could think of paying them off was to do what I'm doing." And I thought, well, maybe socialism is not all that bad.
America's a place. From everything I know, America is bananas. Like, it's truly, because I had some American friends over like 2 weeks ago, and I sort of said that in my opinion, that providing he doesn't get arrested, which I think is highly likely, that if he can run again, I think Trump's got a pretty good chance of getting in if he can run again. If he's able to do it. I don't know if he'll be able to run again because of like the FBI raids and stuff currently happening with him. But if they don't arrest him, I think that, because obviously you have to be loaded to run for the presidency in the US, and Joe Biden's sort of being widely seen as not a strong president. Like, he's not done what they wanted him to do. And in terms of an opposition, I don't really think there is one. I think if Trump can, he'll run again, but whether or not he gets arrested before then is really going to be the big teller. But I do think that if he can run, I think people are so discontented that he could get in again. But I also think it's sort of like a reflection of like the UK system, in the sense that, the political situation in the UK has never been particularly great. But I'd say the past year, like with the cost of living, like we got predicted, like we're very lucky that everyone in our household works. But I asked to see the predicted energy bill for December, £700. And I was like, it's like, okay, this is putting people who have like decent wages into trouble, in the sense that you've got enough money, you've got very little money left over for yourself. But what happens when you've got a problem? Because, like, for example, the NHS dentistry is really expensive. When I first moved to London, I was just on an entry-level salary and I had to get a root canal, and I couldn't afford to get a root canal in London under the NHS because it was in the region of £1,000, and I didn't have that to spare. So I had to come up to Scotland, and I still had to borrow the money.
Yeah. I mean, it's very sad. And what's even sadder, and I don't want to alarm people because it's late on a Wednesday night, but the government's preferred approach to dealing with inflation, running at 12%, 18%, depending on who you ask, is they will kill the economy. They will stamp on the economy. Why? Because only by killing the economy can they press the restart button. And of course, they'll have to do that. They'll have to raise interest rates, which means people who are very wealthy and have significant savings are going to make a lot of money. Everyone else is going to be in the immortal phrase, in deep doo-doo, because they'll want, quite naturally, if you have to choose between eating and heating, you want a raise. That's perfectly natural, it seems to me. As soon as you ask for a raise, you're a troublemaker, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, I wrote about all of this in the Sunday National last week, if anyone wants to follow it up. But I mean, it's a very serious situation, and I worry for people who don't have lots of resources to call upon people who are just getting by. I just feel that there's nobody around looking after their interests in a way that makes any sense. I've been hugely underimpressed by Keir Starmer, I'm afraid. I hate to get all political, but that's my sense of it, is that right now what's needed is somebody on the left who's actually forceful, it seems to me, and assertive. And I don't see any evidence of that. What I see, in fact, is ducking and diving, which I think is deeply demoralizing for people who are looking for some protection. But anyway, we have to wait and see what happens, I suspect, Is there anything you feel tonight that we haven't covered and you would like to talk about, however briefly, in the time that we've got left? Is there anything you would like to say to the audience tonight?
I think the thing that I've tried to say repeatedly, but it's some people understand what I'm saying, some people don't, is that you can promote Scottish culture, you can promote something that's inherent to Scotland, but it doesn't make you political by default. I don't think the Scots language is inherently political. People are trying to politicize it, and it really, really annoys me because I don't think I'll ever write a political book. I mean, who knows what happens in the world? Maybe that would affect it by default, but I'm never gonna write a book where I'm like, yeah, Scotland should be I've not lived in Scotland for 5 years. I don't really feel like I've got a right to have an opinion on what goes on in Scotland because I've not lived there for so long. If I go back, yes, I would have a right to an opinion, but I think that with I've lived in England, Ireland, and Scotland, and I've lived under the euro. I've got experience of all of it really at this stage, and but yeah, I don't like this sort of people forcing political opinions on me or assuming that because I write Scots, I'm a nationalist and therefore I deserve to get abused online. And the abuse doesn't bother me at all. It really, really doesn't. But it annoys me when people make assumptions about me and assumptions about my background. And the thing about it as well is they've sort of got it into their head that I know with Chris McQueer, he joked that someone made up a rumor that his parents were doctors and that he lived in the West End and was privately educated and stuff. And he's like, nah, that really didn't happen. But I get the frustration and the anger and the sort of but I also think that if someone was from the West End and from a more affluent Scottish background, why should they also not be allowed to write in Scots? You shouldn't gatekeep it and say, well, unless you can prove your poverty, you're not in the club. That's ridiculous as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think you put your finger on a wider malaise. For example, the Tories in Scotland up until about 50 odd years ago were proud to be both Scottish and British. They didn't see anything wrong with being Scottish. They promoted Scotland and Scottishness. That all changed, and now the Unionists have sort of taken over the Conservative and Unionist Party. And people who are on the right, who I suspect are just as enamoured of Scots as you are, and would want to talk about it, feel suppressed, perhaps, because of this wing that's taken over the party, and that it's just unacceptable. And you can't be Scottish and British. You have to be British. And you might be Scottish with a small s, but we don't want you talking like Scots. That would be dreadful. And maybe they ought to man up and get a pair of cojones and come out and actually say what they actually mean. I think there's a great future for the right wing in Scotland, but it ain't in the Conservative and Unionist Party, that's for sure.
No, it's weird because the people are clarify your position, clarify your politics. And I'm I'm happy to say I'm not a Tory, definitely not a Tory, very lefty, that's true, but I'm not gonna I don't think I've got a right to Scottish. I don't know, the ins and outs of what's going on in Scotland politically right now. I don't read, I'm familiar with what's going on because of what I do with my writing, but I'm not someone who knows about the Scottish budget, for example, or what's going on in Scottish schools. I don't know about any of this, so why does anyone give a flying toss what I have to say? They shouldn't care because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. They shouldn't matter. They probably feel they need to matter, but for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. But I hope they keep buying and reading your books. That's what I want.
Hopefully.
And I hope they go to Cosmopolitan, and I hope they go to LADbible and the rest and read.
I don't think my stuff would sit there, but it would be nice if I could publish a few more books. That would make me very happy.
Terrific. Well, I hope that happens, Emma. A big thank you for joining us tonight. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time.
So much for having me.
Yeah, well, it's been a great pleasure, I have to tell you. And please pass on our regards to Iona. And
I will, of
if
course.
you can make it, it'd be great. I'm just going to say a few concluding remarks. If you can stay online for a few seconds afterwards, that would be great. Well, there we are, folks. Another great show tonight. A big thanks to Emma and a big thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Hope you've enjoyed this TNT show as much as I have. It's been a great show. I've learned so much. As ever, we have formidable guests lined up for future shows. We have Alison Graham on next week, so don't miss that. And I hope, as always, a reminder, please do look out for Dr. Elliot Bulmer's column in the Sunday National this weekend. You'll find it in the 7 Days supplement. In closing, since we've been covering works of fiction in part tonight, it seems fitting today to see the publication of the JERS report on the Scottish economy. And not sure quite why the Scottish Government persists in publishing this, as it gives credence to deeply flawed and misleading information, but they must have their reasons. And if they want to come on the show and tell us, that would be great. Also, we mentioned James Cook, the Scotland editor of BBC in Scotland. James, the invitation to appear on the show is still on the table. Come and join us. I mean, honestly, we don't bite. We just ask questions like you do, right? So please don't hide away in the Glasgow offices. Come out and join us. Come on the show. It's entirely free. As I said, we don't bite. We'd love to have you on. So the invitation is repeated. Come and join us. As for the crowdfunder, please give whatever you can to Indie Live. And to all of you, thanks for joining us. Stay safe, take care, look after each other. Good night. See you next week.